So those of you who regularly follow our media outlet know that we cover law enforcement corruption, we cover prosecutorial corruption, court corruption, political corruption particularly, but also church corruption. And in fact, one of the biggest stories we've ever covered at Fitz is the saga of John Paul Miller, the disgraced pastor from Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, who is facing federal charges in connection with the April 2024 death of his wife, Micah Frances Miller. Now, Jenn Wood, we are now dealing with a significant church scandal on the coast of South Carolina. You've been following it very closely over the last week. The Pawleys Island Community Church, there are 4 individuals facing criminal charges, there are civil lawsuits, and all of it stems around the failure of this church and its leaders to protect congregants and particularly children from a pedophile that was on the campus of this religious institution. Jenn, what do we know about this church and this scandal that is gripping the state?
So Pawleys Island Community Church is Georgetown County, and they also have a preschool, Pawleys Island Christian Academy, which they run. And it came to light in the past 2 weeks that the custodian of the church and the school was a registered sex offender.
Oh boy.
So the director of the preschool, Nikki Howard, along with the main pastor, Don, and his wife, Jenny Williams, were all charged in relation to this individual being employed at the school.
What, for failing to report him, or what?
Failing to report him, allowing him to be around children. We're talking like conspiracy, neglect. I mean, it is absolutely insane. And since this has all come out, 4 lawsuits, separate lawsuits, have been filed against the church.
Okay.
And 2 of those lawsuits are by parents whose children have alleged they have been sexually abused by this.
By the person who they failed to report?
Yep.
Oh my goodness. So you've got criminal charges tied to failure to report, which are linked to these allegations, and then you've now got civil complaints that detail these alleged acts. I'm guessing this is some bad stuff.
It's very horrible stuff. I mean,
oh boy.
It's horrible. And, you know, we've got, a lawsuit by employees who said they attempted to make reports and were subsequently punished. We also, Troy Stiles over at Blunt Force Media, who's covering this, dug up prior DSS reports where they were cited for not running background checks and having unqualified individuals working within that school. There are a lot of things going on with this church and this story, and the fact that they allowed this individual to work there, the fact that law enforcement, that when they're on the sex offender registry, they have to report. Were they not checking to see if where he was working had a school attached to it? Did they not know? So there are a lot of questions about the processes that led to this individual being around children.
Well, if these allegations are true, not only did they know, but those who tried to report it were shouted down. It baffles me, Jim. We see these church scandals all the time, sadly, here in South Carolina. We cover dozens of them since FITSNews first came into being. It's always the cover-up.
Yeah.
It's always the effort to conceal. If you just report it and come out with it, it's dealt with, it's done, it's handled, the chips fall. But it's these constant efforts by so many of these churches to try to cover this stuff up. That's where the problems really start.
Yeah, I think it's evident that, if people did their jobs and protected children, none of this stuff would happen. I'll never understand it.
Well, it's a particular layer of hypocrisy for people who claim to be, of the Christian faith, because, what is it? The least of these. That was the whole Christian maxim. Let the children come to me. I mean, this is a place where children are supposed to be safe, above all other places. And so to see this kind of thing happening, this story, by the way, has just exploded. We're not the only ones covering it. Obviously, you mentioned Troy Stiles. He's done great work on it over at Blunt Force Media, digging up files. But this has become a huge mainstream media story. National stories now zeroing in on it. Jenn, what are the next steps in this saga?
You know, there is potential that additional charges could be filed. Right now, these 2 civil lawsuits, which allege that children have been abused by, in the school, just got filed. There have been no criminal charges filed against anybody in relation to those assaults.
Okay.
But, you know, really we're looking at, you know, who authorized this person's access to the school, the children. When did they know he was a sex offender? And what did they know? I mean, there are a lot of questions that I think we're looking to get answered, and hopefully we will get those answers. I think Georgetown County Sheriff Carter Weaver has done a really good job at communicating with media in the aftermath of this. He seemed just as disgusted as I am.
Yeah, Weaver recently named Sheriff of the Year here in South Carolina. Of course, given how many sheriffs in South Carolina are getting in trouble, they got a very narrow pool to draw from. But you're right, Weaver's done a great job on this case. There's no doubt about that. And obviously the criminal investigation is ongoing. The civil discovery process just getting ramped up. So we're going to learn a lot about what really happened here over the coming weeks. And Jenn, you're going to keep us up to speed not only on that, but as I mentioned earlier, John Paul Miller in his case still moving through the federal system. We're going to keep tabs on that. I want to ask you though, there were developments this week in another huge case that sadly has a child sex offense charge tied to it, but I'm referring to the murder case out of the upstate, the Rose Petal Murder that just blew up back in early part of last year when we covered the trial up in Greenville, South Carolina. It ended with the conviction of Zach Hughes, the most unlikely killer I think we've ever covered, a classically trained pianist who somehow got mixed up with the father of a young girl who was being abused. Killed the mother, who was participating in the abuse, according to police, and that was his defense. But he wasn't allowed to present that defense.
He was not
during his trial.
He was not. That was probably. I mean, I covered Murdoch, and honestly, I think that trial was a little wilder than Murdoch.
Wow, the Rose Petal trial.
I mean, it was crazy. So it was determined prior to the start of that trial that evidence related to the child sex abuse could not be presented to the jury. Well, that child sex abuse is what Zach Hughes said made him feel like the child, Christina Parcells' young daughter, was in imminent danger, and is why he ultimately murdered her. He took the stand in his own defense, and he sat up there and he admitted to brutally killing Christina Parcell, but he was not allowed to say why. So that, as soon as that trial ended, his defense team filed a appeal with the South Carolina Court of Appeals, and it has been moving through the appellate process. But what changed things was the plea deal of Christina Parcell's fiance at the time of her murder, Bradley Post. He was facing tons of child sex abuse charges, and he had been facing those since the time of her murder. He was arrested shortly after her murder, and earlier this year, the South Carolina Attorney General's office, they were at a court hearing, pled, and he was released, time served. He is on the sex abuse registry. We'll see what we see based on the Polly's Island, what good that does. But they said that they had to plea it down because there was not a lot of evidence of his participating in the abuse.
Yeah, they were trying to say that it was the mother of the child that was the ringleader.
Correct.
Of all of it.
Now, the prosecution in Zachary Hughes' murder trial, to get that evidence of the child sex abuse, to get it to not be presented to the jury, had argued that there was really no evidence that she was involved.
And that's now turned on its head.
That has all turned on its head. So did they have that evidence? I mean, there's been no allegation of withholding evidence, but this week the Court of Appeals basically held that appeal in abeyance and remanded that issue back to the circuit court to determine if Zachary Hughes should get a new trial based on newly discovered evidence.
So the Court of Appeals has said we're going to press pause
Correct.
on your appeal, and we're going to send this back to the circuit court to determine whether or not this issue should have been considered. Now, this sounds familiar.
I was going to say, does that sound familiar?
Because we're going to go back to 2023 after Alec Murdaugh was convicted of murdering his wife and younger son. He petitioned to have his appeal suspended so that the jury tampering issue could be sent back to the circuit court. And the appellate court did send that back, which is what led to the appeal, which is what led to Alec Murdaugh's verdicts eventually being overturned.
Correct.
So we're going on the same path here with the Rose Petal case now. And Jen, I got to be honest, there's never a circumstance that would, in my mind, justify the ritualistic. I mean, this was someone who was stabbed, dozens of times in the head and neck.
Yes.
Rose petals, dead-headed roses sprinkled around her body, which was then dragged through this house. This was a horrific crime scene, one of the worst crime scenes that we've ever encountered in our coverage at FITSNews. But we're still under a situation where, okay, does he at least have the ability to argue, why did I do this?
Right.
Why? And so I'm not saying that this guy deserves, to get another trial at this point, but certainly the evidence and the motive that he claims led him to do that, I think is something a jury ought to hear.
Correct. And he, multiple times, he received a contempt of court charge during the trial for trying to bring it up.
Yeah.
But, when you're looking at motive for murder and you're trying to give the jurors a picture of what happened and what led to this horrific crime, he was not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And the arguments that kept him from doing that, now we see
were based on some sketchy at best determinations.
Correct.
And perhaps were completely false.
Yes.
Now we're looking at an allegation that this woman was at the center of that alleged abuse, which ostensibly motivated him to do what he did. So
yeah, I think he's got some very valid arguments. And if the same judge, Judge Fant, hears those arguments, I would be mad if I was a judge and saw all this. Like, why did you tell me that?
Well, and also I think it's important to point out that just like Alec Murdaugh, Zach Hughes has some impressive attorneys arguing these issues for him. Obviously Murdaugh has Dick Harpootlian, Jim Griffin, Phil Barber, and Maggie Fox on his team, but Zach Hughes has Andrew Moorman and Mark Moyer. I actually sat down with Andrew and Mark when this case first entered the appeal process and interviewed them about what they thought was coming down the pike. And I tell you, those two guys, they were loaded for bear then, and it looks like they're loaded for bear now as it relates to this appeal and these arguments that are going back now to the circuit court. Jen, I got to ask you, who is the judge that's going to make this determination?
Right now indications are it will be Judge Fant, unless they file a motion.
How does that work, though? How does the judge who is allegedly making this bad decision regarding admissibility?
Did he make a bad decision? He made a decision based on the
allegedly
information.
made a bad decision. I don't know.
He made a decision based on the information that was presented to him by the prosecution.
Okay, so now they're going to say you have a chance now, Your Honor, to revisit that decision.
Correct.
And what happens if he decides that the new evidence would have impacted his decision? Does Zach Hughes get a new trial?
Yeah. If they determine that, there's 5 prongs, but one of the main prongs is would this evidence potentially have changed the outcome?
Oh, wow.
The jury's verdict. And I think it might have. The jury really looked like they were looking for motive. They had questions while they were deliberating about, about motive. So I do think it's substantial.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be fascinating to follow. And again, I think if this were a situation where somebody comes in the house and it's like a double tap to the back of the head, maybe that's one thing, but we're not dealing with that, as we've mentioned. This was a ritualistic murder, and we are led to believe that part of that was in some way or some form or fashion attributed to the relationship between Zach Hughes and his alleged co-conspirator, John Mello, the father of this child.
Who's currently in prison, in jail, awaiting trial for conspiracy.
Yeah, tied to this murder.
Correct.
And so
He was arrested during the trial.
And
I mean, I'm telling you, this was wild.
Yeah, and as a father of daughters, I could not imagine being in the position of hearing these kind of allegations involving a situation that I had no control over, but still the level of just brutality that we're looking at in this case is pretty rough. And so we'll see whether or not the nature of this crime perhaps somehow mixes with the alleged motive for committing it. Again, this ain't a time to kill. If anybody's familiar with the old John Grisham movie, this is not a time to kill. This is a vastly different situation, and we'll see ultimately what the judge decides about this new evidence, and then if it does go back to a jury and they do get to hear that evidence,
Correct.
maybe we'll see what a jury thinks about that, Jen. But you've done amazing work covering this. Speaking of some pretty graphic crimes that we've covered, there's another big hearing coming up this coming week, Jen, up in the upstate, another graphic homicide, a quadruple murder.
Correct.
One conviction is already in the books, and then there is a huge 2-day motions hearing for the second defendant who is going to face trial this fall,
October 13th right now is the current anticipated trial date.
Referring, of course, to Amy Vilardi, who has already been found guilty for the murder of 4 of her relatives, and Ross Vilardi, her husband, now scheduled to stand trial. Jen, give us a quick update. You're going to be up there.
Yeah, so we'll be heading up Monday morning. The Judge Jane Merrill, has determined no video will be allowed in the courtroom, so we will be covering that via,
Old
follow
school.
us on X and doing an article. So yeah, it's he's being represented by Sean Kent. The South Carolina Attorney General's office is handling the prosecution. I believe Heather Weiss will be the lead attorney on that. But
2 great attorneys.
yeah, 2 very good attorneys. I think this will be very interesting. He filed a number of pretrial motions, basically wanting saying that the indictment, the delay in the indictment between the time of the crimes in 2015 and trial, which is 11 years later in 2026, has created problems for his defense. A lot of these witnesses have not have died. They are medically unable to testify. We've got motions related to the arrest warrants that were signed. He would like those thrown out. Motions related to the financial motive, whether or not that will be allowed in. So yeah, there are a lot of very interesting issues that should be discussed in this hearing. The prosecution has filed motions. They don't want any evidence of possible third-party involvement presented, basically your standard motions. But yeah, I think it'll be a really interesting hearing, and definitely interesting to see, how Sean Kent presents this case, because, his co-defendant's already been found guilty. So, what are they going to change up?
It's a high hurdle, but I tell you,
Different judge, yeah.
Anybody can clear it, it'll be Sean Kent.
Yeah.
That guy's an amazing lawyer. We talked about him on last week's show. Jen, before you go, you've covered so many huge stories this week, followed up on so many of the bigger stories that we've been covering in years past, Rose Petal, Vilardi's. But I want to ask you about a case that hit this past week, and it is one that has really shocked the entire Palmetto State. And I'm referring, of course, to the drowning murder, allegedly, down in Modoc, South Carolina. This is a story, Jen, it's just shocking to read these reports. But we also, in this case, have a criminal investigation that's ongoing. Mm-hmm. We have a potential civil line of inquiry opening up. The family of this poor young boy has retained counsel, and they are now pursuing an investigation about his placement in South Carolina's foster care system.
Correct.
What do we know about this drowning death, Jen? Update us on the civil and the criminal angles here.
So our Erin Parrott has been covering this story for FITSNews. She's been doing a great job. But this 13-year-old Daryl Martinez Lowry, he was killed at this boat dock. Allegedly, there was a confrontation between 2 individuals, and they drowned him. They killed him.
According to the police report.
Allegedly. So at this residential boat dock in McCormick County, and it's just a horrible situation. He had been placed in foster care. We don't know all of the circumstances surrounding that, but SLED did a press release this week announcing the arrest of 17-year-old Landon Austin Moore and an unnamed 16-year-old who is right now a juvenile, so they aren't naming him. His family has...
But that could change if that juvenile is tried as an adult.
As an adult,
which
correct.
could happen.
Which, yeah, absolutely could happen.
And I think if, depending on the facts that emerge, many would argue should happen.
Correct. The family has retained civil attorney, I think Tyler Bailey?
Tyler Bailey,
yeah,
that's right.
Who said that he is pursuing that independent investigation to determine what happened, what led up to this, where was supervision.
It was a recent foster placement,
correct.
Bailey said earlier this week.
Correct.
And he's looking into that foster placement to see whether that may have led to this.
Yeah, I mean, it just is one of those horrific stories as a parent that,
Yeah.
you know, we both have kids around that age, and
Yeah.
it's hard to read.
Yeah. A lot of hard to read stuff in this week's episode. You do a good job going through it, Jen. I know it's always a challenge not only to get all of these facts that are flying around and nail them down, but also when you're dealing with reports like this that are just kind of gut-wrenching to process. So you did an amazing job this week on this stuff, Jenn Wood.
Thanks. Well, I thank God for Erin on that one. That was, yeah, she did a great job.
No doubt. We'll keep you in the loop on all these cases moving forward. And once again, Jen, thanks for bringing us up to speed on all these cases.
So we once again kicked Will out because you and I love talking about Chuck Wright, and he is prepping for a big interview, which will drop next week. I think will be interesting. But we are here to talk about the never-ending saga of former disgraced Spartanburg County Sheriff Chuck Wright, because this past week we've had some pretty major developments. First of all, release of the SLED investigative file into Chuck Wright and his decades of leadership, and along with the announcement of a hearing related to his 65 state-level ethics charges.
Ooh-wee.
So where do we start?
Well, let's start with the newest information first, which is that, as you so gracefully introduced, the former sheriff of Spartanburg County, Chuck Wright, sentenced to 41 months at the federal level on July 7th, as well as ordered to pay some $462,000 in restitution, even though in open court they noted that the former sheriff just doesn't even have that much money no more. One of the highest paid, actually at the time, the highest paid sheriff in South Carolina doesn't even have enough money for some of his federal court fees.
Where did his money go?
It certainly didn't go to his spiraling pill addiction, because it appears as though he was stealing money from taxpayers to subsidize that, but we'll get into that in a moment. While this federal case played out, in the background were 65 ethics charges filed by the South Carolina Ethics Commission in, I believe, October of 2025. So for months, these have just been hanging back there. There have been multiple continuations filed by Chuck Wright's attorney at the ethics level, which is Stephen Denton, his former captain at the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office, who has gone on to represent a series of very questionable people in Spartanburg County, people that Chuck Wright appeared to have had some familial ties to at some point in time. Much more on that at a later date. So, following 4 amended notices of hearing, it appears as though the Ethics Commission will finally hear the allegations against Chuck Wright on August 20th, 2026, 9:30 a.m. at the Columbia Hearing Room. Come one, come all. Now, as for whether Chuck Wright will be there, we were told by the Ethics Commission that only those under subpoena are required to attend their hearings. So the natural question that we had for the Ethics Commission was whether or not Chuck Wright is under a subpoena. And like so many state agencies, when asking any question on Chuck Wright, they told me they could not confirm that note there. So we don't know whether he'll be there or not. We most certainly will be there.
Correct. So he is scheduled to report to federal prison to begin serving that.
Right around the same time
right.
as August 20th. Yeah, so sentenced on July 7th at the federal level, given approximately 45 days to report to prison, which it appears as though he's going to do so in Georgia. I don't really know how this is going to work, but I'm sure the state has it all figured out,
I'm sure they do.
as they have demonstrated time and time again, not just in the Chuck Wright saga, but beyond.
So the charges he's facing at the state level ethics commission relate to nepotism for
Right.
the hiring of his son.
Yeah, so we've got approximately 2 to 3 charges relating to the nepotistic deputization of his son, Jared Andy Wright, who it appears as though he hired so as to salvage his son's law enforcement certification at a time when it does not appear as though any law enforcement agency would hire Jared Andy Wright. Go figure that. So Chuck Wright was sure to post that swearing-in ceremony to the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office Facebook page, thus triggering a ethics probe that preceded at least the public's knowledge of the federal probe, which preceded the public's knowledge of the state criminal probe, which was aborted thanks to 10th Circuit Solicitor Micah Black. So yes, we've got just 2 to 3 nepotism charges, and then 60 plus ethics charges related to Chuck Wright's alleged abuse of his county credit card to the tune of $18,000 during his final 4 years in office.
Well, that is going to be a interesting hearing.
Oh yeah, and it could result in ... fines for the felonious former sheriff.
Fines which he could not be able to pay.
Might not even be able to pay, the destitute former sheriff of Spartanburg County.
Now, the other big development that we had in the past week was SLED, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, finally
After 9 months.
finally released their entire investigative files. So we had FOIA'd for that 9 months ago?
Yeah, approximately 8 to 9 months ago.
And they said that they were unable to release it until the adjudication of his federal charges.
It's funny because the state's investigation was closed. They declined to prosecute, but
Right.
nonetheless, they sat on that for no particular reason.
So they released that. It was a 75-page file they released on Friday. Your report came out on Saturday. If you haven't read it, read it because it is a freaking barn burner.
Inside the state's abandoned case against ex-Sheriff Chuck Wright, if there's one article of mine that I would encourage people to read, it would be that one.
It's one of my favorites. I like all your articles. So.
Thank you, Jenn Wood.
But that report, 75 pages, I could hear you in the office next door to mine. Just what the...
I mean, it felt like Wall Street 2008. I mean, the folks that I was having to call to confirm, as well as just share, almost a can you believe this shit?
it was like confirmation of so much that we had been told.
So much that we had reported and been slammed for even talking about, as well as so much that I am kicking myself now for having sat on, just because it seemed too salacious, too unrealistic. So, I mean, we did the right thing, I think, by waiting until confirmation for so much of this stuff. But nonetheless, that confirmation came in the form of SLED's investigative notes from their multi-agency probe into former Sheriff Chuck Wright, which what do we see in this 75-page file? We see evidence of wide-scale drug distribution within Spartanburg County that neither started nor stopped at former Sheriff Chuck Wright. And the reason that we're harping so much on it, well, part of the reason that I'm harping so much on this is because 10th Circuit Solicitor Micah Black was handed this file and did nothing with it.
It actually, that was noted in that file.
Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, SLED Chief Mark Keel not only supported Micah Black's decision to decline to prosecute Chuck Wright at the state level, but felt that the feds had it pretty much handled, even though, according again to SLED's investigative notes, where the feds were present for a majority of their interviews, it appears as though the feds left more meat on the bone than they bit off.
I've never seen anything like this file, and in what the interviews and agent notes brought to the table, and what did not happen. I mean, the other thing, this file contradicted the narrative that the feds had been giving...
That the feds presented in open court.
Correct.
Over several hearings, over innumerable filings. So yes, what is that contradiction? Now I know that I keep hyper-focusing on the drugs, but there is far more than drugs in this situation, in this vortex, in this black hole that just makes less and less sense the deeper you go. But nonetheless, the feds maintain that Chuck Wright did not pick up on a pill addiction until approximately March or May of 2023, when he obtained some 147 painkillers under misrepresentation. Whereas SLED releases a summary of an interview that they appear to have conducted in the presence of a federal agent with Chuck Wright's drug dealer, who openly volunteers that he'd been selling to the former sheriff since approximately 2016.
Nothing to see here, folks.
Now, I find it awfully rich that the multi-agency probe that noted multiple drug dealers, I mean, they name-dropped them in the file. None of those findings even resulted in charges for Chuck. That's part of what is so shocking about this thing.
Now, I'm assuming that these dealers named in this file are not only dealing to Chuck Wright.
Oh, surely not. I mean, as a matter of fact, three of them had already been on our radar for months. So some of the stories that we will now be able to kick out, thanks to SLED's confirmation of what we've been aware of for so long, buddied with additional context that it does not appear as though SLED or the feds ever even cared to look at, will be published.
I can't wait. I mean, and beyond the drugs, there were other parts of that investigation.
Well, so many unanswered questions, including but not limited to one of the co-defendants in the federal case, which would be the former Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office Code Enforcement Officer Lawson L.B. Watson. Now, the feds maintain that this was a no-show deputy who was employed in the shadows of the sheriff's office since approximately 2005, Chuck Wright's first term as sheriff, where he collected compensation for doing absolutely nothing. Again, for decades. That's according to the feds. Even though in SLED's investigative notes, where they're interviewing a multitude of SCSO deputies with federal agents present, all of them note that the dude was showing up to work, albeit not much. And I don't think anybody is contesting that the workload on L.B. Watson's desk was minimal at best. But what everybody seems to testify to is that he did show up to work, again, at very interesting hours of the night, but was leaving sticky notes multiple times a week, asking his commanding officers, his superiors, for work. But nonetheless, let's charge him with wire fraud.
Now, and the other thing to talk about, I mean, there were individuals within that sheriff office command staff who were in charge of approving his timesheet, approving his raise.
Who would also have been in charge of giving him work.
Correct.
But let's charge the guy who didn't receive work. Again, the closer you look at this picture, the less and less, the more abstract it becomes. The folks that appear to be complicit in this vortex, both behind and in front of a law enforcement badge, are aplenty. And we've already name-dropped a few of them, in particular, former SCSO Chief Deputy Billy Parris, who appears to have actually signed off on paperwork that gave L.B. Watson a raise in 2005. And then, when the state and federal heat came down, he appears to have obfuscated or at least denied any kind of a county IA into LB, and then denied giving records to confirm whether LB was doing any work. But let's not focus on Chief Deputy Billy Parris. Instead, let's allow him to resign right before the newly elected sheriff takes office. There is a lot of people that were allowed to jump ship.
Quietly
jump ship. And we're keeping an eye on the folks that we are aware of, but what concerns me is how much we don't even know. I mean, the feds and the state and federal agents certainly don't appear to have pulled these red strings half as much as we did within the first couple of months. So the sky's the limit on
and a lot of what was in this file has validated some of the stuff that we have not reported on. That
Right.
we kind of held back because we thought it was.
Because again, it just seems so crazy.
There's no way.
Yeah.
No.
No, there's no way that the sheriff flew his helicopter to a drug deal. There's no frickin' way.
His helicopter or the county's
Oh, I'm sorry,
helicopter?
the
Wait.
county's helicopter.
There's
Because the guy who doesn't have any money, who was driving a pickup truck off the lot of Vic Bailey's dealership every 18 months, only to have those pickup trucks at least subsidized in part by the opioid recovery fund, and then get outfitted with county dollars, all the while using his taxpayer-funded credit card that the county never noticed any abuse of, to pay for Fuddruckers and Pizza Hut and car washes and anti-diarrheal medication and drug tests. No money. Nothing to see here, folks.
Nothing
Please
to
move
see
along.
here. We're done. Yeah.
And there's no reason to ask. I mean, there's certainly no outstanding questions regarding the envelopes that Chuck Wright appears to have pulled from L.B. Watson's desk. There's nothing to look at there. There's no reason to ask what L.B. Watson was doing on the clock, so long as we charge him with not showing up, even though by all indicators he was.
Right.
And then let's allow the sheriff's office chaplain, the third co-defendant in the federal case, to pretty much walk with just a couple years probation, even though he appears to have been the primary enabler of Chuck Wright's abuse of taxpayer dollars to the tune of $90,000 cash to go towards God knows what, including but not limited to pills.
I think you're disappointed.
Me? No, I am a happy taxpayer. I am a happy Palmetto State resident who feels that SLED did their job, that the Attorney General did his job, that the 10th Circuit Solicitor did his job. I feel everybody did their job because apparently the job was to let Chuck Wright walk.
And go down to Georgia, pick his own prison.
And cartfish while he waits.
Yeah, well, I think I'm looking forward to see where you take this story next, because I think the threads that they stop pulling, you're going to keep pulling, and I have every intention to help you keep pulling those threads.
Well, let's go, Jenn Wood, to the movies.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to see where we take this next, and I think people should keep an eye on FITSNews.com, because we've got some stories that we're planning, that additional reporting that I think is going to blow your mind.
Can't wait, Jen.
Thanks.